Lee Teho wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the morning sun rise over planet Kethavara. The golden light painted the purple trees in warm colors that reminded him of autumn back on Earth. 8 months had passed since he arrived at this remote research station, and he still found the alien world beautiful. The research station was small but comfortable. It had everything he needed to study the local wildlife. Computer screens lined one wall, showing data about the creatures he observed each day. Sample containers filled with plant specimens sat on metal shelves. Outside, energy barriers hummed, quietly, designed to keep dangerous animals away from the building. Teho sipped his coffee and looked at today's schedule on his tablet. He needed to collect more behavioral data about the Kethavarians, the deer-like aliens who lived in the Yao, nearby forests. These gentle creatures fascinated him with their intelligence and family bonds. A soft chime from his motion detector made him look up. Through the clear window, he saw a familiar sight that always made him smile. Velnara was approaching with her 3 cubs trailing behind her. The adult Kethavarian moved with graceful steps through the tall grass. Her fur shimmered like oil on water, changing from deep blue to silver as she moved. She stood about as tall as Teho's chest, with 4 legs like a deer but a more wolf-like face. Her large eyes showed intelligence that sometimes startled him. Behind her came the cubs. Nim was the smallest, barely reaching Teho's knee. His fur was still the pale gold color of youth. Kayla was the boldest of the 3, often the first to investigate new things. Her fur had started showing adult patterns around her ears. Vex was the quietest cub, preferring to watch from a distance before approaching anything new. Teho grabbed his recording equipment and stepped outside. The morning air smelled of sweet flowers and damp earth. Velnara stopped about 20 meters from the station and made a soft warbling sound. It was her greeting call, something Teho had learned to recognize over the months. He sat down in the grass and turned on his camera. This was always the best way to observe them without causing fear. The cubs had grown used to his presence and no longer ran when they saw him. Nim was the first to approach today. The little cub crept forward with obvious curiosity, his nose twitching as he smelled the human. Teho stayed perfectly still, letting the young alien decide how close to come. The cub reached out with one small paw and touched Teho's boot. Satisfied that the human was safe, Nim settled down nearby to groom his fur. This simple act of trust always amazed Teho. These creatures had no reason to trust an alien species, yet they chose to anyway. Kayla joined her brother, but she was more interested in the recording equipment. She sniffed the camera with great interest, her whiskers twitching. Teho spoke softly to her, explaining what the device was for, even though she could not understand his words. The sound of his voice seemed to calm her. Vex remained close to his mother, watching everything with careful eyes. Velnara made soft clicking sounds to encourage him, but the shy cub preferred to observe from safety. As Teho watched the family interact, he recorded their behaviors in his notes. The way Velnara positioned herself to keep watch for danger, while her cubs played, showed remarkable intelligence. She understood that the human was not a threat, but she never stopped being a protective mother. The cubs played a game that reminded Teho of tag. They chased each other in circles, making happy chirping sounds when one was caught. Their joy was universal, something any parent from any species could understand. After an hour of observation, Teho noticed storm clouds gathering in the distance. Velnara saw them too and called to her cubs with a series of low hums. The family began moving toward the forest, seeking shelter before the rain arrived. As they left, Nim looked back at Teho and made a sound that almost seemed like goodbye. The human smiled and waved, knowing he would see them again tomorrow or the day after. Back inside the station, Teho uploaded his recordings to the main research database. His reports would help scientists on other worlds understand these peaceful creatures better. The Kethavarians showed no signs of aggression toward any species. They lived in harmony with their environment and seemed genuinely curious about the strange human who watched them. The afternoon brought heavy rain that drummed against the station walls. Tejo used the time to analyze data from previous observations. He had documented over 40 different Kethvarian families during his stay. Each group showed similar patterns of care and cooperation. As evening approached, the rain stopped and Tejo stepped outside to check his equipment. The air smelled clean and fresh. Purple flowers had opened after the rain, filling the clearing with their perfume. His long-range sensors showed normal readings. No ships in orbit, no unusual energy signatures. Just another peaceful day on a quiet world where intelligent creatures lived simple, happy lives. Tejo prepared his dinner as the twin moons of Kethvara rose in the darkening sky. Their pale light made the wet grass sparkle like scattered diamonds. He felt fortunate to witness this world's beauty and to gain the trust of its gentle inhabitants. Tomorrow would bring more observations, more data, and hopefully another visit from Velnara and her cubs. Life on Kethvara followed predictable, peaceful patterns. He had no way of knowing that tonight would be the last normal evening he would spend on this world. Far above in the darkness of space, something was approaching. Something that would change everything for both human and Kethvarian alike. The alarm woke Tejo from deep sleep. Red lights flashed across his bedroom as the station computer announced an emergency. He rolled out of bed and stumbled to the main control room, his heart racing. The long-range sensors showed something that made his blood run cold. A ship was approaching Kethvara from deep space. It was not human design. The computer had no record of this type of vessel in any database. Tejo pulled up the sensor readings on his main screen. The ship was massive, at least 3 times larger than his research station. Its hull was dark metal with sharp angles that reminded him of a predator's teeth. Strange energy readings pulsed from its engines. He tried to establish communication with the unknown vessel. No response came back. The ship continued its approach toward the planet without acknowledging his signals. Fear crept into Tejo's chest as he watched the alien craft enter orbit. This was not a peaceful exploration ship. Everything about its design suggested violence and hunting. The ship began scanning the planet's surface with powerful beams of energy. Tejo watched the scan patterns and realized with growing horror what they were doing. They were mapping population centers. They were looking for the Kethvarian settlements. Within hours, smaller craft detached from the main ship and descended toward the planet. Tejo counted 6 of them, each one sleek and fast. Like flying daggers, they spread out across the continent, heading for different Kethvarian communities. He tried to contact the nearest settlement to warn them, but his communication equipment could not reach that far. The research station was designed for scientific work, not for long-distance emergency broadcasts. The first attack began at dawn. Tejo watched through his satellite feed as one of the alien craft landed near a peaceful Kethvarian village. What emerged from the ship were creatures from a nightmare. The aliens were reptilian and moved on 6 powerful limbs. Each one was twice the size of an adult Kethvarian. Their bodies were covered in dark scales that seemed to absorb light. Massive claws extended from each limb, and their heads were filled with sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. The Kethvarians had no weapons. They had never needed them. Their species had evolved without natural predators on their world. When the 6-limbed hunters attacked, the peaceful creatures could only run in terror. Tejo watched in horror as families were scattered and destroyed. The alien predators moved with terrible efficiency. They were clearly experienced hunters who had done this many times before on other worlds. The pack worked together like wolves. Some drove their prey toward others who waited in ambush. They cornered entire families and showed no mercy to the young or old. This was not hunting for food. This was slaughter for sport. Within 30 minutes, the entire village was silent. The predators gathered their victims and loaded them onto their ship. Tejo realized with sick understanding that they were collecting trophies. Similar attacks began at other settlements across the continent. The alien hunters were systematic. In their destruction, they had studied the Kethvarian population patterns and planned their strikes for maximum effect. Tejo tried desperately to contact Earth or any human military base. The nearest help was 3 days away at fastest travel speed. These gentle creatures would all be dead long before rescue could arrive. As the attacks continued throughout the day, Tejo noticed movement in the forest near his station. Velnara appeared at the edge of the clearing, but something was wrong. She moved with a painful limp and dark blood stained her shimmering fur. Behind her came her 3 cubs, terrified and pressed close to their mother's sides. Nim was shaking with fear. Kayla stayed alert and ready to run. Even shy Vex seemed to understand that something terrible was happening. Velnara looked directly at Tejo through his window. Her large eyes held intelligence and desperation. She was asking for help in the only way she could. Tejo opened the station door and stepped outside. Velnara moved toward him slowly, her injured leg making each step difficult. The cubs followed but kept looking back at the forest with obvious terror. When she reached him, Velnara made soft sounds that Tejo had never heard before. They were not her usual calls. These sounds carried pain and pleading. She touched his hand with her nose and then looked toward her cubs. She was asking him to protect her children. Tejo knelt down and examined her wound. Deep claw marks ran along her rear leg, clearly made by one of the alien predators. She had barely escaped with her life and the lives of her cubs. He helped her inside the research station and activated the energy barriers. The defensive systems were designed to keep out local wildlife, not military threats, but they might provide some protection. As he treated Velnara's wounds, Tejo tried to process what was happening. An alien species had come to this peaceful world to hunt its inhabitants for sport. They were systematic killers who showed no mercy. The cubs huddled together in the corner of the room, their eyes wide with fear. They had never seen violence before today. Their entire world had been one of safety and play until these monsters arrived. Tejo checked his sensors again. The alien ships were moving in a pattern that would eventually bring them to his area. The research station was isolated, but it would not be hidden forever. Night was falling over Kethvara, but there would be no peace. Somewhere in the darkness, the alien hunters were planning their next attack. They had tasted Kethvarian blood and found it good. Tejo looked at Velnara and her cubs. These gentle creatures had trusted him enough to seek his protection. Now he faced an impossible choice. He could try to hide and hope the aliens passed by, or he could prepare to fight creatures designed by evolution to be perfect killers. The communication signal crackled through the station speakers. The voice that emerged was harsh and filled with cruel amusement. It spoke in broken human language, clearly learned from captured databases. Human, creature. We smell your fear from here. You protect the small prey animals. This is interesting. Tejo moved to the communication panel, his hands shaking slightly. Through the window he could see 6 shapes moving through the forest toward his station. The alien hunters had arrived. We are the Sectar, the voice continued. We travel, the stars to find new prey. These dear things provide good sport, but you are something new. We have never tasted human before. The largest of the approaching figures stopped at the edge of the energy barrier. Even from a distance, Tejo could see its massive form. The creature stood on its rear 4 limbs while its front 2 arms ended in claws as long as kitchen knives. Am Grixith, pack leader. You will surrender the small prey. Do this and we will kill you quickly. Refuse and we will make your death last many days. Tejo looked back at Velnara and her cubs. The injured mother had positioned herself between the door and her children, ready to fight despite her wounds. The cubs pressed against each other, too frightened to make a sound. He thought of Commander Park Hye-jin, his superior officer back on Earth. She had trained all research personnel in basic survival skills. Her voice echoed in his memory. When you cannot run and cannot hide, you must fight with everything you have. Tejo activated the communication system. His voice was steady when he spoke. This is Human Research Station 7. These creatures are under my protection. Leave this world now or face the consequences. Grixith made a sound that might have been laughter. Small human thinks he can fight the Sectar pack. We have hunted on 1,000 worlds. We have killed creatures much larger and stronger than you. The pack leader gestured to his hunters. They began circling the research station, testing the energy barriers with their claws. Sparks flew where they touched the defensive field, but the barriers held. Your small fence will not stop us for long, Grixith called out. We will tear it down and take what we want. Tejo began moving through the station, taking inventory of everything that could be used as a weapon. His background was in xenobiology, not combat, but 8 months alone had taught him to be resourceful. The geological survey equipment included small explosive charges for taking rock samples. The spectrometer could be modified to create focused laser beams. The atmospheric processors contained chemicals that could be turned into toxic gas. As he worked, Dr. Kim Min-seo's voice came through the emergency communication channel from Earth. The xenopsychology expert had been monitoring the situation. Tejo, these creatures hunt in coordinated packs. Their weakness is that they rely on group tactics. If you can separate them, they become less effective. Tejo nodded as he began connecting power cells to the spectrometer array. How long can the barriers hold? Based on their claw structure and the energy readings, maybe 2 hours if they work together to break through. The station shuddered as the Sectar began their assault on the energy barriers. Their claws scraped against the protective field, creating sparks and a horrible screeching sound that made the cubs whimper. Velnara moved closer to Tai-Ho and made soft warbling sounds. He could not understand her language, but her meaning was clear. She was thanking him for protecting her family. "I will not let them hurt you," Tejo promised, though he wondered if he could keep such a promise against these perfect killing machines. The first barrier section failed after an hour of constant attack. Alarms blared throughout the station as one of the smaller Sectar forced its way through the gap. Tai-Ho was ready. He triggered the modified spectrometer, sending a focused beam of coherent light directly at the intruder. The laser cut deep into the creature's shoulder, causing it to retreat with a howl of pain and rage. The wounded hunter's blood hissed where it hit the metal floor. The scent drove the other pack members into a frenzy of hunger and violence. "First blood to the human," Grixith snarled. "This one has claws after all. Good. Killing strong prey is more satisfying than slaughtering the weak ones." Tejo began, implementing his plan. Using the station's electromagnetic systems, he created interference patterns that disrupted the natural pack communication the Sectar used. Their coordinated movements became confused and erratic. When the second barrier failed, 2 hunters rushed through together. Tejo was waiting with a trap made from geological charges. The explosion knocked both creatures backward, though it did not seriously injure them. But it proved something important. These aliens could be hurt. They were not invincible. The cubs watched in amazement as the gentle human they knew transformed into a fierce protector. Nim crept closer to watch Tejo work with his improvised weapons. Kala made small chirping sounds that seemed to express encouragement. Even Shy Vex emerged from hiding to see the human who was willing to fight monsters to keep them safe. As the third barrier began to fail, Tejo realized this was only the beginning. The Sectar were testing his defenses, learning his capabilities. The real battle was still to come. But he had proven something to himself and to the watching Kethavarians. Humans did not abandon those who trusted them. When faced with impossible odds, they found a way to fight back. Dawn brought no relief to the besieged research station. 3 of the energy barriers had failed during the night, and the remaining defenses flickered weakly. The Sectar pack prowled just outside the protective field, their eyes glowing with predatory hunger. Tejo had not slept. He spent the dark hours turning his peaceful research station into a fortress of improvised weapons and deadly traps. Every piece of scientific equipment now served a purpose in the coming battle. Velnara lay near her cubs, her wound treated but still painful. She watched the human work with growing amazement. This creature who had observed her family so gently now prepared for war with calm determination. The cubs huddled together, but their fear had changed. They no longer trembled in helpless terror. They had seen their protector hurt one of the monsters. They began to believe they might survive. Grixith tested the remaining barriers with one massive claw. Sparks flew and the energy field wavered dangerously. "Your tricks cannot save you forever, human," the pack leader called out. "When the sun reaches its peak, we will feast on your flesh and crack your bones for marrow." Tejo checked his improvised weapons one final time. He had connected power cells from 3 different systems to create a portable energy cannon. The atmospheric processors had been modified to release toxic gases through the air recycling system. Geological charges were hidden at key points throughout the station. At midday, the last energy barrier failed. The Sectar pack rushed forward with savage roars, their claws scraping against metal as they climbed the station walls. But Tae-ho was ready for them. He triggered the atmospheric system, filling the air around the station with a cloud of poisonous gas taken from the chemical analysis lab. The hunters who breathed it staggered backward, choking and confused. 2 pack members tried to enter through the main door. Tae-ho met them with his energy cannon, the focused beam burning through scales and flesh. The wounded aliens retreated, howling with pain and rage, but the Sectar adapted quickly to his tactics. Grixith ordered his pack to spread out and attack from multiple directions. They began tearing holes in the station walls with their powerful claws. Tae-ho moved through the building like a ghost, using his knowledge of every room and corridor. He appeared where the aliens least expected, struck with improvised weapons, then disappeared before they could retaliate. The first hunter to die was the smallest of the pack. It crawled through a window into what looked like an empty room. Hidden geological charges exploded when it stepped on the pressure trigger. The blast killed the creature instantly. The pack howled with grief and fury at the loss of their packmate. But their mourning was cut short when Tae-ho struck again. He had turned the spectrometer array into a laser grid that covered the main laboratory. When 2 hunters tried to corner him there, he activated the system. Beams of coherent light crisscrossed, the room slicing through alien flesh like invisible swords. One of the wounded creatures managed to reach him, its claws extended for a killing strike. Tae-ho rolled aside and triggered an emergency blast from the life support system. Superheated steam erupted from broken pipes, scalding the alien badly enough to drive it away. Velnara watched the battle through a crack in the wall. She had never imagined such fierce determination in a creature she had thought of as gentle. This human fought not for dominance or territory, but purely to protect her cubs. The young Kethvarians pressed close to their mother, but they no longer cowered in fear. Nim made small sounds that almost seemed like cheers when Tae-ho successfully drove off another attacker. Kayla bobbed her head in what looked like approval. Even Vex watched the combat with bright, interested eyes. They were learning something important about humans. These strange creatures did not abandon their friends when danger came. They fought back with tools and intelligence, turning peaceful objects into weapons of protection. By afternoon, 3 Sectar hunters lay dead in and around the research station. The survivors were wounded and exhausted. But Tae-ho was also hurt, bleeding from several claw marks, and his improvised weapons were running low on power. Grixith called a temporary halt to the attack. The pack leader studied the human through intelligent eyes, reassessing his prey. You fight better than expected, small human. But you cannot win. We have killed entire armies on other worlds. You are alone with primitive weapons. Tae-ho used the break to reload his energy cannon and check on his Kethvarian friends. Velnara nuzzled his hand gently, her way of saying thank you. The cubs gathered around him, offering what comfort they could. You are not alone, he told himself quietly. These creatures trust you. That means something. As the sun began to set, Grixith prepared for the final assault. The pack leader had lost half his hunters to human cleverness, but he was confident that numbers would eventually win. When darkness comes, we will end this, the alien promised. You have proven yourself. Worthy prey, we will honor you by eating your heart first. Tae-ho checked his remaining weapons and explosive charges. He had bought time and proven that humans could fight back against seemingly impossible odds. But the hardest battle was yet to come. In the growing twilight, he heard something that filled him with hope. The distant sound of engines approaching from orbit. It was too soon for the military fleet, but perhaps a scout ship had arrived early. The approaching ship appeared through the evening sky like a silver dart cutting through purple clouds. It was small and fast, clearly a human reconnaissance vessel rather than a full military ship. But to Tae-ho, it looked like salvation itself. Lieutenant, Choi Soo-min's voice crackled through the communication system. Research Station 7, this is Scout Ship Falcon. We received your emergency signal. What is your situation? 6-limbed alien predators attacking the station. Teho replied, quickly. 3 hostiles remaining, pack leader still active. I have Kethvarian civilians under protection. The scout ship circled the area, its sensors mapping the battlefield below. Through his window, Teho could see the remaining Sectar hunters taking cover in the forest. They recognized the threat from above. Grixith roared his fury at this new development. The pack leader had been certain of victory, but now faced weapons from the sky. His hunters looked to him for guidance, their confidence shaken by the unexpected arrival. Attack now, Grixith snarled to his remaining packmates. Kill the human before the sky hunter can help him. The 2 surviving hunters rushed the station, with desperate speed, but Teho was ready with his last geological charge. The explosion brought down part of the roof, crushing one attacker and trapping the other under heavy debris. Lieutenant Choi provided support from above, her ship's weapons cutting precise lines through the forest where the enemies tried to hide. The combined assault from ground and air proved too much for the remaining hunter, who fell to Teho's energy cannon. But Grixith was not finished. The pack leader had survived by being smarter and more vicious than his followers. As his last hunter died, he made a decision that surprised everyone. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, Grixith charged directly at the research station, not to break in, but to drive the humans out. His roar shook the building as he smashed through walls with pure rage and determination. He wants to draw us into the forest, Teho realized, away from air support. The pack leader's strategy was sound. In close combat among the trees, his natural advantages would return. The scout ship could not risk firing weapons where it might hit friendlies. Teho gathered his remaining equipment and helped Velnara to her feet. The injured mother was weak but determined to protect her cubs. The young Kethvarians stayed close to their human protector, trusting him to guide them to safety. They escaped through a hole Grixith had torn in the station wall just as the pack leader burst into the main room. The alien's howl of frustration followed them into the forest. Lieutenant Choi landed her ship in the clearing and emerged with a pulse rifle ready. She was young for a military officer, perhaps 25, with the confident movements of someone trained for combat. "Get them to the ship," she called to Teho. "I will hold off the alien." But Grixith was too cunning to face both humans at once. He melted back into the forest, using his knowledge of hunting tactics to separate his prey. The pack leader began circling through the trees, forcing the group away from the landing site. Teho carried Nim, the smallest cub, while Velnara limped along beside him. Kayla and Vex stayed close, their eyes wide with fear but still trusting their protector. Lieutenant Choi provided rear guard, watching for signs of their pursuer. "Why is it following us?" she asked. "Its pack is dead. Most predators would retreat." "Pack leaders don't surrender," Teho replied, remembering his studies of predator behavior. "He has to kill us or die trying. It is how they maintain dominance." The forest grew darker as they moved away from the research station. Ancient trees blocked out the evening light, creating shadows where anything could hide. Every sound made them pause and listen. Grixith struck without warning. The pack leader dropped from above, landing between the humans and their Kethvarian friends. His massive claws swept out, trying to kill Velnara and her cubs in a single attack. Teho threw himself forward, tackling the alien around its midsection. They went down in a tangle of limbs and claws. Lieutenant Choi could not get a clear shot without risking her fellow human. The battle became primal and desperate. Grixith had all the natural advantages, but Teho fought with something the alien could not understand. He was not fighting for dominance or food. He was fighting to protect creatures who trusted him with their lives. Claws raked across his back, leaving deep wounds. But Teho managed to grab a fallen branch and drive its sharp end into the pack leader's eye. The alien screamed and pulled back, temporarily blinded on one side. Lieutenant Choi seized her chance and fired. Her pulse rifle sent concentrated energy into Grixith's chest, burning through scales and flesh to reach vital organs. The pack leader staggered but did not fall. With his dying breath, he lunged at the cubs one final time. Velnara threw herself between her children and the attacker, ready to die to save them. Tae-ho grabbed his energy cannon and fired at point-blank range. The beam took off the top of Grixith's head, finally ending the threat. In the sudden silence that followed, the cubs crept forward to nuzzle their wounded mother. Velnara was hurt but alive. More importantly, her children were safe. Lieutenant Choi helped Tae-ho to his feet. Both humans were bloody and exhausted, but they had won an impossible victory against a perfect predator. "The fleet will arrive tomorrow," she said. "But I think the worst is over." As they walked back toward the ship, Nim climbed onto Tae-ho's shoulder and made soft, purring sounds. The little cub had found a new hero, someone who proved that strength came not from claws and teeth, but from the willingness to protect others. 3 weeks after the battle, planet Kethvara was no longer the same peaceful world Tae-ho had studied for 8 months. Human ships filled the orbital space above, their crews working to rebuild what the sector had destroyed, and to ensure such an attack could never happen again. Admiral Song Ji-hoon stood in the rebuilt research station, reviewing reports of the damage. Over 40 Kethvarian settlements had been attacked, with thousands of the gentle creatures killed or taken as trophies. The scale of the massacre was heartbreaking, but something remarkable had emerged from the tragedy. The surviving Kethvarians had not scattered in fear or hidden from all aliens. Instead, they had gathered around the humans, seeking protection and offering friendship. Elder Morthak was the oldest living Kethvarian, ancient even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had witnessed the attacks from his mountain home and seen how one human fought to protect Velnara and her cubs. The elderly alien moved slowly but with dignity as he approached Tae-ho. His fur had turned silver with age, and his large eyes held wisdom earned through many years. When he spoke, his words came through a translation device the human engineers had built. "Human friend Tae-ho," the elder began, "your actions have changed how our people see the universe. We believed all creatures lived in peace as we do. The sector showed us that evil exists among the stars." Tae-ho knelt to bring himself closer, to the elder's height. The gesture of respect was not lost on the gathered Kethvarians. "I am sorry we could not prevent the attacks," Tae-ho replied. "Too many of your people died before we could help." Elder Morthak made a sound that the translator rendered as gentle disagreement. "You showed us something more important than protection. You showed us that some creatures choose to fight evil, rather than join it or flee from it." Ambassador Lim. Dae-yoon had arrived with the human fleet to establish formal relations with the Kethvarian survivors. She was an experienced diplomat who had helped many species join the growing alliance of peaceful worlds. "Elder Morthak," she said through her own translator, "the human government offers your people full membership in our alliance. We will help you rebuild and ensure your world is protected." The ancient Kethvarian looked around at his gathered people. Families who had lost everything nodded their agreement. They had seen what humans would sacrifice to protect others. "We accept," Elder Morthak said formally. "But we ask for something more than protection. We wish to learn human ways of fighting evil. Our young ones should know how to defend the innocent as you do." Velnara approached with her 3 cubs, all of them healthy and growing strong. Her wound had healed completely, thanks to human medical care. The cubs had grown larger in the past few weeks, but they still followed Tae-ho. Everywhere he went, Nim had become the boldest of the 3, often climbing onto Tae-ho's shoulder to watch him work. The young Kethvarian had learned to use simple tools by copying his human friend. Kayla spent her time studying human technology with intense curiosity. Even shy Vex now approached other humans without fear. "The cubs want to stay with you," Velnara said through her translator. "You are family now. They do not understand why you might leave." Tae-ho looked at the 3 young creatures who had trusted him with their lives. The bond formed during those desperate hours could not be broken by duty or distance. "Then I will stay," he decided. "My research here is more important than ever. These cubs are teaching us about trust between species." Admiral Song Ji-hoon smiled at this decision. "The fleet will establish a permanent base here. Other species need to see what happened on Kethvara. They need to understand that humans do not conquer worlds. We protect them." The news of Tae-ho's stand had spread throughout human space and beyond. The story of one scientist choosing to fight impossible odds to protect alien children had become legend. Other species were requesting human protection and asking to join the alliance. But the most important changes were happening right here in the rebuilt research station. Young Kethvarians were learning human languages and studying human technology. Human engineers were learning Kethvarian building techniques that worked in harmony with nature. Nim had mastered the art of operating a data scanner, his small fingers surprisingly good at delicate work. Kala had learned to identify different types of metal and crystal, helping with construction projects. Vex had discovered a talent for mathematics that amazed human scientists. The cubs were becoming bridges between their species, showing that cooperation created stronger bonds than conquest ever could. As evening approached, Tejo sat outside the station with his extended family around him. Velnara rested nearby, content to watch her cubs play with human children who had arrived with the fleet. The games they invented together needed no translation. Elder Morthak joined him, moving carefully but still strong despite his age. The Sektar believed strength came from killing, the ancient Kethvarian observed. You taught us that true strength comes from choosing to protect life instead of taking it. Taiho watched Neem teaching a human child how to identify edible plants while Kayla and Vex demonstrated a Kethvarian game to fascinated young humans. We all protect each other now, he said. That makes us stronger than any predator pack. Above them, the twin moons of Kethavara rose into a sky filled with human ships standing guard. But the real protection came from the bonds forged between species who chose trust over fear. The cubs would grow up in a universe where humans and Kethvarians stood together against those who would harm the innocent. And someday, they would teach their own young ones that true strength came not from claws or weapons, but from the choice to care for others as family.